Hey, this is Zach Log the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Chris,
Hello.
and we are getting together tonight to discuss um, the Jim Butcher story, Christmas Eve, and I guess we could kind of consider this a continuation of our talk on briefcases. So. Now, being that this is a 10-page short story, I don't think we're gonna read the whole thing tonight. And so I will provide a link to the story. It is available for free online. I will provide a link to the story in the comments. And if you have not read it, I would suggest go ahead, pause this, take 10 or 20 minutes and read the story, and then come back and listen to the talk. It will probably make rather more sense that way. So, having said that, Chris, what are your initial thoughts on this one?
Well, my initial thoughts is so they kind of it's sort of set up as a sort of like Christmas Carol thing where the main character receives, supernatural visitors that show him about things. And once I realized that, I was thinking about it, and it's like, well, they do kind of cover like a present, a past, and a future. Had you kind of noticed that, or was I reading too much?
I was thinking the same thing, and I'm curious where you like who's filling what role in your reading of this.
Okay, so I think Mab represents the present because she gives him a gift for his daughter. So this is like, okay, this Christmas, this is him spending time with her and working on their relationship. Then for uh then for Molly, I feel like that's the future where she's sort of setting him up where he can move on with his life and grow into a better person, like for Christmases to come. And then with Kringle, that one's pretty obvious. Like that's him sort of remembering his past and also sort of reconnecting with the sort of memories he had with his father at Christmas. So that's sort of how I broke it down. I did have to like read it again, be like, okay, yeah, this does actually work. But yeah, so like Molly's, it's not as direct, but it does seem to be a lot with him like letting go so that he can move on.
I I think that's a decent argument. I actually saw the same Christmas Carol structure. By the way, if um if you have not read uh Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, I would recommend reading that one too to anyone out there. It's and I was rather surprised actually when I read it myself for the first time a few years ago, because I'm used to whenever you see a film adaptation of anything, like there's always huge chunks just hacked out. Um, and actually, A Christmas Carol, as you've seen it on film or stage, is probably pretty complete, because it's a short story. It's not a full novel. So it's not a full novel, and so like most of the adaptations I've seen actually pretty much have the complete story, which is it's a slightly odd sensation, as I've been used to seeing books turned into films, and like, okay, how much are they going to have to hack this one up? But anyway, but yeah, like I said, I saw a Christmas Carol too. Although I read it slightly differently, and I'll present my argument here, I guess. Um, I think that I think that uh, what's her? I think that Mab is Christmas future, Molly is present, and obviously you really can't argue about Kringle being Christmas past. Um, and the reason I think that, well, okay, for one thing, just in terms of like the narrative structure, that's a little more satisfying. Having future, present, past uh, feels a little more, feels a little cleaner than having, present, future, past. That seems odd to me. But the other thing, like, okay, uh, especially, oh yeah, that adds to it too. Um, the Mab's present is for his daughter, is for Maggie. And so, and we've probably talked about this a little bit before when we were covering some of Shakespeare's early sonnets. Um, you're it's you don't have you don't fully get the sense of this until you're actually a parent, but your kids kind of are your future. Your kids are, the biggest part of you that's going to carry on after you're gone. Um, and so I saw that as being future. And then, Molly as Christmas present, because this is how this is, what his life is, this conflict and, striving and, sometimes, failing to achieve his end, sometimes in ways that cause a lot of pain. Um, and the other thing, and also the other thing, a reason I think this is because it also works in terms of like like we said, we agreed that Kringle's gift was the past, and the past is to his father. And if the past is his link to his father, then it seems like the future, having the future be his daughter, the gift to his daughter, I think that makes sense.
Right, but you see, I feel like that kind of applies more towards Molly for basically the same reasons. Because, so like during their conversation, Molly, let's see, maybe you should think about what you want to teach Maggie. And it's about him forgiving himself for the things he's done and the things that he's been involved with so that he could build that relationship. And one of the last things they say is, then I guess you've got some work ahead of you. So I feel like that's more of an ongoing thing.
Yeah, and the gift for Maggie is very ephemeral, is very like it's not.
Yeah, it's
It's not.
until noon the next day.
Yeah, and so I think that would also be a point in your theory, in favor of your theory.
Yeah, like I
I
said, I had to go back and reread it to sort of line everything up because I was a little confused on those two myself.
Oh, and also, something else we were discussing before we started recording. For those of you who are not aware, this story takes place after the events of Peace Talks, which is the upcoming Harry Dresden novel. And so in his conversation with Maggie, and he's talking, not Maggie, in his conversation with Molly, there's too many M's. Anyway, in his conversation with Molly,
Mouse.
Does Kringle have an identity that starts with an M? I'm not aware of one. Anyway, in his conversation with Molly, what he's referring to there are apparently the events of Peace Talks, which will, we now know, result in a lot of people dying. Um, so, what happens in that story should be interesting. Um, I doubt it will. In terms of like overall dramatics, I think it's kind of difficult to top the end of Changes. Um, he did basically wipe out a species um, with one stroke. That's kind of hard to top. But
To be fair, they did most of the work themselves.
yeah, but I mean, anyway. But okay. So, but like I was saying, that is a point in favor of your theory. I will say, I have at least one more argument for my interpretation, which is in the original story, in A Christmas Carol, you have Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas future. Which one is the terrifying one?
Honestly, it has been a long time
Okay,
since I have watched or read A Christmas Carol.
okay. So yeah, well then I'll have to feed you the answer for that. In the but in yeah, in A Christmas Carol, the Ghost of Christmas Past is this big jolly man surrounded by a feast, and shows Ebenezer Scrooge the oh crud, darn it, just a second. Okay, sorry, background noise over here. But anyway, he shows Ebenezer Scrooge the parties he attended as a young man, and all the fun times, which actually again, well, not exactly, but kind of matches Kringle's role here. And Christmas Present is I don't remember that one as clearly, but it's basically an kind of elfin figure. It's a small, insubstantial fairy creature kind of thing. And Christmas Future is apparently doing double duty as could be doing double duty as the Grim Reaper, because it's this large, this towering black cloaked figure. He may even have skeletal hands. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I kind of seems to match some of the descriptions I've seen, or some of the films I've seen. Um, and so, like, in terms of the roles in this story, obviously Kringle, as Santa Claus matches with Christmas Past. Molly, that one doesn't really change that much, but like the one you're actually scared of is Map. And so I think she kind of matches Christmas Future in that sense a little bit as well.
I could see that. Yeah. So for Past, it's pretty obvious. For the other two, it looks like you could. It looks like the lines are a little blurred, a little bit more. I'm still leaning towards Molly being the future, but I can definitely see your side.
But so with the obvious comparisons with A Christmas Carol, and the other thing, of course, this is a pretty light-hearted little story. It's not anything big or dramatic. It's not a monumental life change for Harry Dresden. So it does start off with him being grumpy and grumbling, and he ends up in the Christmas spirit at the end. So that matches the general, what you call that, the general narrative arc as well, I guess you could say.
Right. It's not as flashy as the stuff that goes on in the in the novels or even some of the other short stories. But I do feel like for the character, it is very significant because as a character, uh, in a lot of ways, he's kind of defined by the things that set him apart and make him lonely. Because, like, to start off, like, he has like no family that he even knows of. Whenever he meets Thomas, he is just so excited to have a brother, to have a family connection. And then later on, he learns about like Ebenezer, and he has his like a sort of adopted sister, uh, just somebody that he connects with. So you have points like that, but like as a character, like he's kind of defined by the things that he's lost. So I think having this opportunity where he actually gets to feel like a father, and you really see him realize that to be a father, he also has to work on himself and sort of putting in the work. Like, he's frustrated building the bicycle, but by the end, he realizes that, hey, this is going to make his daughter happy. Like, it's worth putting in the work. So it's not flashy at all, but as far as like a character moment, like as him growing as a person, I do feel like it's pretty significant.
Well, and the other thing, you talk about in terms of character, you said, about, where is it? Give me a moment. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to find the passage here. I have Molly rapped me on the head again and said, "You're like a broken guilt record." You can, and skipping down a bit, you can forgive yourself, Harry. The world won't end, and it would be good for your daughter. And it's like that's actually one of the other kind of defining characteristics of Harry Dresden. He feels guilty for the things that he wasn't able to fix, and I actually read this series a little bit out of order, and so I read some of the later books early first, and it's like what happened to Susan Rodriguez, and he blamed himself, and this was all his fault. And then when I actually read Grave Peril, is that it?
I think it might be with the
Okay.
party.
Yeah, and then I went back and read Grave Peril, and I'm like, no, 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 Harry, this was not in any way, in any capacity, your fault. She was stupid. She did something really foolish and really dangerous, and like everything that fell out from that was because of her, because of her actions, and you trying to make trying to rescue that situation, or trying to make something out of that mess. And so like him carrying around a load of guilt that for things that are not his fault is also a very big character trait for Harry Dresden.
Right, and he does feel the need to like to be the hero. It's not that he wants the fame and the glory. He just feels like a lot of times he's the man in the situation. He's the only one that could deal with it, so he's going to do what he can. So once he sets his mind to something, like if he fails, then that sort of hits him kind of hard. And at that party, when he starts that fire, yeah, lots of things happen. They find a lot of like mortal corpses, but the question sort of left hanging in the air, like, okay, did he kill them? Were they already dead? Did the vampires do this? So even that whole situation, you leave out the Susan part of it, and there's a lot that he could feel guilty about. Because I think one of the things about him is he has a ridiculous amount of power. Like, even as far as like wizards go, he has a ridiculous level of power. He doesn't always
And
have the control that is needed to wield it. So that right
and
there, yeah. So that right there, like, he's always going to feel, if I would have been a little bit faster, a little bit smarter, if I would have worked a little bit harder. So even when he legitimately fails, giving it his best shot, he's always going to feel like he could have done more.
and as we know, he does have pretty he does have quite a bit of power, and as we know, with great power comes quotes from Spider-Man's Uncle Ben. Um,
Yes. Uh,
but, go ahead.
his power is rivaled only by his pop culture knowledge.
I'm kind of wondering. I'm trying to figure out if he has himself referenced that Spider-Man quote, because it would be the kind of thing. I
Well,
don't remember it, but it would fit.
I believe Jim Butcher has done some writing for Spider-Man. I could be wrong. I'm going to look that up real quick to see if I'm just making that up. But
Okay, but so
but yeah,
while you're looking, oh, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like Harry Dresden, like, he is such a good, complicated character where it's easy to sort of talk about him like in tropes, but at the same time, like, he is a complete character. Like, he is a very round character. He has his strengths, he has his weaknesses, and I think one of my favorite things about the series, looking at the series as a whole, is, yes, he starts off with all this power. He's overpowered, like, literally, but not figurative, but like not within the story, because he doesn't have that control. He can't always do what he wants to do. Sometimes he has to hold back. But as he grows, like, in his like magical like knowledge, and as he, mentors others, he does learn that control. So even though
Well,
he starts off with the high, like, sort of raw power, he refines it as the series goes along in a very tangible way.
the other thing with that is he does have a lot of power, and he's learning more and more, you know how to use it, and more tools and tricks, and getting better. At the same time, in terms of like plot and story, he's not an overpowered character, because he's consistently facing situations that put everything he has to the test. Um, which actually, it's kind of funny. That reminds me of straying a little bit, because we occasionally go a bit off topic on these talks. Um, that reminds me of a problem, a thing I noticed a while ago about Orson Scott Card's writing, because he has several series, several different stories that he follows, and they always start out really good, but as the story goes on, the hero, the protagonist, consistently gets more powerful, or better at figuring out whatever it is. And in the late series, in later in each series, they tend to be kind of boring, because they have too much power, and also they're too morally pure. Like, they're too, like, absolutely good, and it's just like, this is okay, yeah, sure. um
like Ender being able to create like human beings out of thin air, for instance.
Yeah, well, and and that's not his, but like he has an ally that you know it would be reasonable to call a god, like Jane in the Ender series, like it would calling her a god or a goddess, I suppose, would not be an unfair description, relative to human beings, and so and also like he to uh and this is in which one is it? It's in one of the Ender. It's in one of the Shadow stories, um, and he's just like too uh, too morally upright to be believable or interesting. And I'd have to. It would take a while to explain that, so I'm not going to go into the whole thing.
But yes,
but
so Jim Butcher did write a Spider-Man novel, Spider-Man: The Darkest Hours.
I might have to look that up. So anyway, but back to this story. One thing I was going to say, Michael, when Michael first comes down, well, actually, yeah, that's his only appearance in the story, and he comes down and talks with Harry a little bit about building the bike and having kids. He says, it's the most annoying thing you'll ever miss once it's gone, and that's I'm a parent. I have two little boys running around the house. Hopefully not giving their mother too much trouble for bedtime at the moment. And like there's these things that they do that are it's like frustrating, and it's like I'm just trying to wash the dishes. Can you please do whatever? But at the same time, like like he says, it's the most annoying thing you'll ever miss once it's gone, and you realize later, like, that's wow, he grew out of that, and now it's gone, and wow, that kind of hurts a little bit, and so that's a very apt it's a very apt description of being a parent, I think. And the other thing, which is at the very end of the story, which is another good note there. Where is it? And Maggie wakes up. Oh wow, Santa's real, and he left me a bike. And Harry has spent all night, putting this thing together, and he was obviously very frustrated and tired. And then, oh, Santa did it. And like, okay, leaving aside, Santa, like another, Harry looks at her and smiles and yet says, yep, he did. And, leaving aside the Santa question, like, again, that's another part of being a parent. You do all these things that, you definitely don't get credit or recognition for now. And maybe once they're grown up, you will. But and it can be a little frustrating, but at the same time, you just smile and keep going, because that's part of the game.
Yeah.
That's part of how it works.
Of course, in real life, the kids grow up, learn there is no Santa, and that their parents have been doing all of that for them. Whereas for Dresden, it's the opposite. He puts all the work in, but now his daughter knows for a fact that Santa exists. He will never get credit for any Christmas present ever. Okay, so a couple of the sort of like small things though. The Frozen reference. that went completely over my head. I had to ask my wife about it, and she was like, "Yes, that is the song from Frozen." And then also, I just love the point. I just love the fact that when Santa does show up, Dresden makes a point of saying that he is unarmed because in his world that is a legitimate concern.
Wait, see, where is this? Just a second. Oh, let me see.
Let's see.
Oh, and there was
He
no sword at his hip. Okay.
yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, it was probably under a different name, but he and Kringle have actually gotten into a fight before. Do you know what I'm talking about, or do I have to? I just
Yes. That's why I like the detail so much, because for most people, seeing Santa is pretty awesome. For Dresden, having Santa show up out of nowhere, that could be the last thing he ever sees.
what was yeah. So in Cold Days, he and Kringle slash Vadarung slash Odin do actually fight, although it's never entirely clear how much Kringle was actually putting into that fight and if he was throwing it. Um, it seems plausible that he was throwing it a little bit, but it's never actually spelled out. Um,
Well, and anytime you're dealing with the fairy courts, there is what they want to do and what they are obligated to do. Those are very different things. I'm thinking of the eldest Gruff, where it's like, yeah, like, oh, you want a donut, huh? What sort of donut you want?
well, geez. I actually I haven't I skipped over that one. I was rereading the like about the last half of the series so far, not that long ago, and I skipped Small Favor, so I don't remember the details of that one.
Yeah,
Um,
so
but
basically the idea was that the brothers Gruff, they were obligated to stop Harry, but Harry had a favor from the summer court. So before the eldest Gruff like just flat out kills him, Harry's like, "Wait a second, you don't actually want to kill me. You're just obligated to, but I have this favor to call in. So if you just take 15 minutes to do this favor for me, it's like this whole situation's done with." And there's sort of a wink and a nod to it. So that's how this great favor that he earned turned into a donut, just asking a guy for a donut, which is just one of the many crowning moments of awesome in this series.
so let's see. I don't I don't know. I think I covered most of the main things I wanted to say about this story. It's well, okay. One other thing, and I'm not going to harp on this. I hope, but it is definitely a secular Christmas story. Like the and I this one doesn't bother me, but like one of my pet peeves is people complain about Christmas music coming on so early, on the radio, and I'm like, no, I have no problem with Christmas music, coming on in mid-November. I get bored. I get annoyed really quickly with generic winter holiday music. That I get over pretty quickly. But actual Christmas music, you could play that half the year and I'd be fine. So,
Now,
but I
the,
go ahead.
So this does actually raise some interesting questions about the Dresden Files universe, because we've seen aspects of like legitimate Christian history, or even just sort of Christian traditions, like they are real. And then you also have like the fairy courts and the other stuff. But Santa Claus is based on like a historical figure, Saint Nicholas. So how much of that and how much of, this sort of like, fairy king mantle, like how much of that is the same? Like is Saint Nicholas just like sort of taken on the mantle, and then is he sort of shaped to it over the like couple thousand years in the same way that like Harry's having to struggle against his winter night mantle, and Molly's having to struggle against the winter lady mantle? Or was Saint Nicholas so influential that rather than being shaped by the mantle, he shaped the mantle?
Well, see, the other thing that further complicates that is that this character is not just Santa Claus / Kris Kringle. This character is also, as I mentioned earlier, Vadarung / Odin.
Right, but at the same time, with the like winter ladies and like the summer ladies, those courts, they can still be killed and somebody else just takes their place, where in a way they are still the same person because the mantle tries to shape them to fill the role. So while at any given time it might be a different individual, over time it's relatively homogenous. So he could very easily have just replaced like whatever previous being there was.
That's well, and then the other part of that is like, okay, you have Winter Lady, what is it? Winter Mother, Winter Queen, and Winter Lady. Is that or Winter?
Right. It's like the Maiden, Mother, Crone division.
So you have those three, and we in the series in Cold Days, and actually now that I think about it, earlier in Summer Night, yeah, we've actually seen how that one works. But then there's the question of like how universal is that? Is that like just because we know that happens to these ones, is that the same thing that would happen if Odin / Kris Kringle were killed, or on Halloween because that's the only night that can happen, or would he just die?
Wait, I think we're on to something. I think Bishop Nicholas was the first Tim Allen from the Santa Claus.
Oh, okay. Anyway, well, yeah, that. So the Santa Claus movie starring Tim Allen may canonically fit into the Dresden Files universe. The nature of the mythologies seem to match. Okay.
Next time Jim Butcher has like a AMA or something on Reddit, we're gonna have to get to the bottom of this.
Is Tim Allen's The Santa Claus canonical to the Dresden Files? Okay. Well, I think I've covered most of the things I wanted to touch on in this story. Was there anything else for you?
I think that was all.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me, and to everyone watching this, I can only say Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Y'all have a good one.